to a good, robust discussion today in a very important issue, and that is largely the principles of redistricting. But prior to that, we have first of all, I'll call the meeting to order of the State Government Policy, Finance, and Elections Committee, today being Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. Have to take care of that audio record to be sure things are properly noted there. And so the first bill that we're going to hear today is Senate File 2409. Welcome, Senator Johnson. Glad to have you here today. In my understanding, this is largely a technical bill that the Revisor's Office and the GIS Office. So with that, Senator Johnson, welcome. And I'll hand it over to you to go ahead and present Senate File 2409. Just a moment, Senator Johnson. Senator Carlson, you have your hand up, but you're muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit of a feel for what we're going to try to accomplish today. Are we going to have this more or less as an informational meeting, or is this something where we're actually going to do work on creating one or in forwarding all of these bills?
Thank you for the question, Senator Carlson. The plan is to move the two bills, Senator Isaacson and myself, to move out of this committee, to move them to the Redistricting Committee.
I see. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And then Senate File 2409 will be handled a little bit differently. All right, thank you, Senator Carlson. If you put your hand down, then I'll know that I took care of that question, and thank you so much. All right, Senator Johnson, go ahead and present your bill 2409.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. This is a highly controversial bill here that deals with the technical metes and bounds. And I'm looking at the bill here, and I believe that Senator Isaacson at one point, or we had indicated that you'd want to be a co-author of that bill. So I apologize. Your name isn't on here. We'll get that fixed up. But this simply takes what the revisor has to do right now is report districts in the metes and bounds. We want to change that to reporting in the modern 21st language of GIS. I believe we do have somebody here from the GIS office who would like to testify on that, and I wasn't given a name. So, Madam Chair, if we could go to that person.
Yeah, thank you very much, Senator Johnson. We did ask both Lee Mueller and also John McCullough from the Revisor's Office and Lee from the GIS Office. Gentlemen, did you arrange for which one of you would start, and then we'll go to the next one? Just raise your hand, whichever.
Madam Chair, I can start.
Okay, John. Mr. McCullough.
My name is John McCullough. I'm from the Revisor's Office. I'll just provide a little bit of background information for Senate File 2409. So, as Senator Johnson said, it removes the requirement for the Revisor's Office to publish in Minnesota statutes the metes and bounds descriptions and replaces it with the plan components report. So the last time the Revisor's Office has published metes and bounds descriptions was in the early 90s. And this was the last time that the legislature enacted a redistricting plan through the legislative process. It was actually a plan that was created by the court, but after the court created the plan, the legislature enacted the plan into law. So generally speaking, though, we do not publish in statute plans created by the courts only. So for the last two redistricting cycles in 2000 and again in 2010, those were court-created plans. So we did not publish the metes and bounds descriptions in Minnesota statutes. So for the last two redistricting cycles, the legal descriptions of both the legislative and congressional plans would be the maps and the related reports, including the plan components report. And these are all generated by the GIS office. So I'm going to kind of point out some issues from the revisor's perspective with how we have how we consider legislation as it relates to redistricting and how that relates to the metes and bounds descriptions. I'll be very brief here. But up until 2000, redistricting legislation that was considered by the legislature was actually meets and bounds descriptions of legislative and congressional districts. So when you looked at legislation proposing redistricting plans, you would read the meets and bounds descriptions of each district. So for purposes of publishing in statute, we would take those plans that were specifically considered by the legislature, the meets and bounds descriptions, and once they were enacted, we would publish them in the same form in Minnesota statutes. But beginning in 2001 and in 2011, because of technological improvements, we've moved away from considering plans through meets and bounds descriptions, and we started considering electronic maps. So the legislation now that will be considered by the legislature for purposes of redistricting is in the form we reference electronic maps. And the issue we see here from the reviser's perspective with considering electronic maps and then publishing meets and bounds descriptions, there are generally two issues that we're looking at. The first one is that we would publish in law things, in this case, the meets and bounds descriptions, and these were not specifically considered and passed by the legislature. So we have the maps and the meets and bounds descriptions. So after the maps would be enacted, the reviser's office would have to go back and translate those maps into meets and bounds descriptions, which that is sort of an onerous task, but more importantly, it creates an opportunity for there to be inconsistencies between the maps that were enacted and the meets and bounds descriptions that would be published in Minnesota statutes. So those are the two issues that we see Senate File 2409 addressing from the perspective of the reviser's office. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. I think that was a good explanation. Mr. McCullough, if I recall right too, when they had the meets and bounds actually in the legislative, in the statutes, if there were any changes whatsoever, there was frequently afterwards bills that had to be addressed and passed and signed into law to correct some of those statutes, to take care of some of those issues that were discovered later.
Yep, Madam Chair, that is correct. And we did have a couple districts that needed to be corrected during the last redistricting cycle. And as you described, it is exactly how it happened.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McCullough. Mr. Mueller, would you like to make a few comments as well?
Hello, Madam Chair, members. My name is Lee Miller of the Legislative Coordinating Commission. If I may, I'd like to share my screen.
We're working that out for you, Mr. Mueller.
All right, can everybody see the plan components report?
Yes, it's a very nice.
Is everybody good to go? Just give me a thumbs up. You're all seeing it. Good.
So, and this is the meets and bounds description in this report. So like John mentioned, there are a lot of issues with using meets and bounds descriptions in terms of the accuracy of the data and using our software to generate this type of report. In this report, there are hundreds of non-visible features for boundaries, unnamed features. There are errors where features try to overlap with district boundaries. So if you were to page through this report, there would be a lot of issues with it. So going to the plan components report eliminates the errors from the meets and bounds report. It's basically a description of the geography. Redistricting geography is hierarchical. So an example of District 1, you'll see it's made up of entire counties. And then an example in District 2, you'll see Becker County, which is then split up into smaller cities and townships. And then you'll see Detroit Township, which is split up into Detroit Township Precinct, which then is broken down into the census block components, which are the smallest geography used in redistricting. So this report it's much easier to understand. There aren't errors, and it's also more ADA friendly. So with that, let's see, I want to unshare.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do you have additional comments to make, Mr. Mueller?
No, I just wanted to know if there were any questions.
Okay. Members, do you have any questions? Senator Osmic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To either of the testifiers, a question I have is on geography. I've read through the current existing language, and when it comes to geography, most particularly bodies of water, there's references to must be contiguous. Is it understood within the terms of the language you have right now, as well as going forward, that geography contiguous, contiguous, I don't know how to say this, contiguality, I don't know if that's a word, means that you cannot skip, and I know House districts are a bit different than Senate districts, but does that mean that you cannot have a Senate district that jumps across the water and goes into sections that are contiguous, that are completely non-contiguous from a landmass standpoint? In other words, it jumps across the lake and picks up a precinct on the other side of a lake, and then that is not connected whatsoever with the other part of the Senate district. Is that the understanding under the current existing language?
Madam Chair.
Mr. McCullough, yes.
Senator Osmic, I think that discussion is outside the scope of what this bill is doing, and relates more to the redistricting principles and how you define contiguity through those principles. But contiguity could be defined however you want, but it wouldn't change the plan components report.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough, and that's exactly right. So Senator Osmic, hold that question, because I think it's a good question to understand what contiguity means. But what this really is happening here is when Mr. McCullough, Mr. Mueller get the final plan, that is then when their job takes over, which is to put it properly into statute or into a report, components report, which is documented and referenced. So this is kind of what happens when redistricting is completed. We're almost kind of starting at the end here with this bill, but it is very important, as you can tell from their testimony and even in that components report. I had not seen a full report like that before, going right down to the census blocks. And that is really the most critical issue, but that's what comes after redistricting is completed. So we're somewhat starting at the end. But I'll come back to you, Senator Osmic, when we get into the principles discussion. Any other questions, members, for our testifiers or on 2409? All right, seeing done, I will move that Senate File 2409 be recommended to pass and to be referred.
Any other questions, comments?
I asked for questions or comments already. Who is this speaking right now? Hello? All right, all right, I guess we're okay. So I'll go back to it. So I move that Senate File 2409 be recommended to pass and to be referred to general orders. Members, please be on camera and unmute. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails and is adopted. Senate File 2409 is on its way to general orders. Thank you, Senator Johnson, for a sterling presentation of meets and bounds and all the GIS details. And thank you, Mr. McCullough. We always do appreciate the revisor's office and our GIS folks, but when you come and present this, it only makes us appreciate you even more. Thank you so much. All right, members, and now we will get into the next bill on our agenda. Senator Isaacson. Welcome to the committee, Senator Isaacson. Glad to have you here today. Getting to have this great discussion on the principles of redistricting. And Senator Carlson, I will have you move Senate File 2308 for Senator Isaacson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm so move Senate File 2308.
Okay, members, and the bill then is before us. And as I understand, I believe, Senator Isaacson, you do have an amendment, and it is generally for us that we will, this is a delete all amendment, so it's sometimes better to, as an author's amendment, go ahead and apply it to your bill and then start with the discussion. Okay. All right, Senator Carlson, would you move the A1 amendment to Senate File 2308?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the A1 amendment for Senate File 2308 for consideration for the committee.
Okay, members, this is an author's amendment, and we will have a thorough discussion, but being this is an author's amendment, we apply them to get it, the bill in the shape the author would like. And on that motion from Senator Carlson, all those in favor of the A1 amendment to Senate File 2308, please say aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. The A1 amendment is adopted. Okay, Senator Isaacson. Now, to your bill.
Thank you so much. First of all, really appreciate that we're having the discussion, and thank you for having us today and hearing my bill. I really appreciate that. I have one quick question. Are you planning on passing both on to redistricting? Both bills are being planned to pass on today. Is that correct, to redistricting? Is that what you said?
Senator Isaacson, yes, we are going to move your bill and also my bill on to the redistricting committee today.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. All right. So we sat down, a couple of other senators, Senator Kunish and Senator Murphy and I, and really did a lot of homework to learn more about the process. You know, I've been aware of what happened in 2012 and even talked to some of the folks that were engaged in that process then to get some perspective. And then Steve Peterson, who is our researcher, has done a wonderful job helping us out with that as well. And I can't thank him enough for his help with this bill. Our goal was, pretty simple. And you'll see at the top, it's to create fair maps through a transparent process, right? And there's really three parts in this bill. We have the principles that guide the drawing of the maps, the evaluations to ensure that we follow the principles and didn't create unintended consequences. And then finally, to provide reports that really show that transparency. And you'll see when I get down there that we have asked for a lot of reports that give us different ways to kind of slice and dice the map. So we feel like we've really created a situation that's fair and really represents the state. And so our purpose statement, as we talk about in there, is just the map should be drawn with as little political bias as possible through a fair and open process. My goal, I think our goal, was to make sure that this did not favor any legislator or any party. Really trying to draw a map that's the best reflection of our population divided up into 67 parts for each district. And that's really the goal. And we really want to be clear that that has been our priority, to stay above the political fray and try to keep this in the realm of just good policy. And so I think what you're going to see here is, I'll just go through the principles. We did list the principles in order of priority. We looked at them both in terms of what the Constitution or the statute requires, how they've been used in the past, and preferences. As you know, numbering is required by the Constitution. That's subdivision 2. Subdivision 3 is nesting, which is also required by the Constitution. Subdivision 4 is we can't favor a political party and a candidate, and we specifically don't allow for incumbents' addresses to be considered or known in the process of the redistricting, making the maps. And the idea is to create a map that's as fair as possible and not even given the temptation at this point to look at that, so we can have a map that kind of goes through the process as cleanly as we can muster. And then we look at subdivision 5. It's equal population within a plus or minus of 1%. Now, Madam Chair, you might have a better perspective on this than I do, having had more experience in this, but my understanding is the courts have pretty much settled on 2% of a margin of error. I know some advocates talk about 5%. We're looking at a 1% in terms of what the equal population is per district. So I don't know, at some point I hope to hear you comment on that to get your perspective on that. Subdivision 6 talks about convenient and contiguity. Senator Osmek, I struggle with that word as well, as required in the Constitution. Subdivision 7's new, but what it does is it specifically outlines the geopolitical realities of tribal reservations and says we can't split them unless it's absolutely necessary, trying to think of them as their own political subdivision. But we also saw it because they're not quite the same as other political subdivisions that we wanted to give them their own line. If we can do it all at all possible, not divide cities, counties, and townships, that's subdivision 8. Subdivision 9, the district shall not disperse or concentrate Black, Indigenous, people of color, and must comply with the 14th and 15th Amendments of the Constitution and the Voting Acts of 1965 as amended. And so the idea is that we want to make sure we protect communities of interest. And then subdivision 10 is we have to identify and preserve those communities of interest beyond just some of the demographic questions I bring up in the previous subdivision. The district shall be structured, subdivision 11, into compact units, and subdivision 12, looking at, kind of what the courts did in 2012, this idea of core districts can be preserved if that's possible. I know we're looking at about a 6,000 person change in terms of the size of districts. If I remember correctly, it was 79,000 in 2012. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then now it'll be about 85. And so I don't know how much, and that's why that is at the bottom. Subdivision 12 is at the bottom, because I recognize there's going to have to be some changes as the population is shifted across our state. Where I think we go beyond just the normal set of principles, but we ask the question. First of all, I need to apologize if you hear kids crying in the background. I've got 3 kids who all have lightsabers today because it's May the 4th. And inevitably, when a 7, 6, and 4-year-old get lightsabers, there's going to be lightsaber battles and there's going to be winners and losers. So I apologize in advance if you hear some of the losses occurring behind us.
Well, I would actually welcome them to come and say hello to us. They come close. We love having them.
Madam Chair, I want you to stay in control of your meeting, and I'm not sure that would happen if they showed up. So we'll see what happens. They will come in sooner than later. So we did, sorry, a little off track there. I just heard the yelling in the background. So we asked the question that once we have the principles in place and we draw the maps, how do we know that the maps are what we think they're going to be? And one of the questions we had is it possible that we could create unintended consequences in drawing a fair map? So we wanted to look at that. And I know in the court, we reflect some things the courts looked at in 2012. So we go back and we have some measurements looking at how we measure how well the maps preserve, identify communities of interest in the principles, how consistency of the compactness scores. And what's important about that is I don't care if the compactness scores are all 0.4 or 1.8. The goal is that they're all very similar, right? I just want to be consistent across, that the compactness scores are as close together as possible, so we don't have a large deviation across that. That's kind of the goal with that. I'm not interested in going beyond 2, as I understand that's where the courts have kind of drawn the line, although I don't know if there's specifically any legislation federally or locally that has delineated what that should be. We want to make sure that the map results in proportional representation of districts compared to statewide elections, and then whether the map disproportionately burdens BIPOC, female, or incumbents of one party. If we draw the map, we think it's fair, and it turns out we have somehow put 4 Republicans or 4 Democrats somehow in the same district, we'd want to know that and then fix that so we didn't do that at that time. And that's where we look at incumbents, and the only place we'll look at incumbents afterwards is to make sure we haven't outrightly favored one party or the other that way, or burdened one party or the other. Once that's done, we go on to the third section, and this is where we look at reports that we can have. And the map, and the bill outlines them in more specificity. There's a lot of different names used and empirical data that's done in the past and how those reports are ran. But we look at reports that will reflect population equality, BIPOC voting age, contiguity, I hate that word, compactness, splits in political subdivisions, splits in native reservation land, communities of interest, change in core districts, incumbents, and components that follow the principles. So that's kind of the overview of what my bill does. Again, you know, I'm really excited to talk about this, and I'm just going to be upfront. I know that up here, and I specifically can have the presentation of being somewhat adversarial in these situations, and in this situation, I'm truly not. I'm truly looking forward to us having as much of a good conversation and learning in the process, as I'm new to this and figuring it out as I go, and I'm really looking for input and feedback, and wondering if there's a chance that we could be against the odds and really put something together that the governor can sign and put us in a really positive place. So with that, I would stand for questions if you have any, and I really appreciate the committee's time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Isaacson. We do have a question from Senator Osmic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this goes back to the question I presented earlier. Senator Isaacson, I have seen maps done by known Democrat operatives that created a couple of interesting scenarios. What is your opinion of jumping across water bodies to pick up precincts or pick up segments of precincts that are non-contiguous to the remaining section of the Senate district? Is because this is being recorded, and I want it to be put on the record that your party does not appreciate that level of gerrymandering. I just want to see what you have to say about that.
Well,
Senator Isaacson.
Senator Osmic, I appreciate the frank and directness there. I will tell you that I cannot speak for the DFL, sometimes I wish I could, but I can tell you that I do not think, unless it's really needed or somehow there are communities of interest that are together, even though there are cross bodies of water. Of course, I don't know specifically if you're talking about Leech Lake or if you're talking about Barrett Lake, which is about 1.5 miles wide, what the difference might be. In general, if water shows a divide to occur where there's two different communities of interest on different sides, and one party wants to reach across and grab a precinct to balance something out that might favor them, I would not be in favor of that. I have not seen maps that do what you're talking about, but you know, I've also told my friends in the DFL, as much as I'll tell anybody else, that in this process, we need to be above reproach. And if that's what's going on, that would not be acceptable to me.
Thank you, Senator Isaacson. Senator Osmic.
Just a brief comment to that. So, Senator Isaacson, this was a map that has been put out there by Democratic operatives that create and because it affects my area, I'll just point to it. It creates a district that goes from Mound and Shorewood all the way across into Minnetonka, a very long, slender one. And then creates and this goes to compactness, which that would violate the compactness.
It would. And
at the same time creates a district that goes from the Fish Lake interchange and where Senator Limmer lives, all the way down to St. Bonifacius at the very corner of Hennepin County, which is another long, slender district. And at the same time, they also run across the water because there is a precinct of Minnetrista that is wholly and separately disconnected from the quote unquote Senator Limmer district because of the water that's in between them. So this is the kind of gerrymandering, and I'm going to say it because it is a Democratic operative that put forth this plan. He lives in Excelsior, strangely, in my district. But that is the kind of gerrymandering that I think you and I both agree makes no sense and should not be tolerated. I know that House districts can be a little bit twitchier, and actually the statute, the way the principles are written, the language gives a little more flexibility to something like that. But I'll tell you right now, that is one scenario that has been presented by your party, And I think it really is gerrymandering at its worst.
Madam Chair?
Okay, thank you, Senator Osmick and Senator Isaacson.
Well, Madam Chair, I would remind the committee that whoever that was isn't me, and that I can't focus on what it's quite amazing. And Madam Chair, I'd comment to this, that there is some really amazing software out there you can get on the internet that'll just let you draw whatever you want. And I see maps flying around all the time. I would be clear to maybe correct Senator Osmick when he says it's from our party, that it's from an individual who is in our party. That's a very different situation. Certainly doesn't represent the Senate. And that I think there's a lot we can do here to focus on what's good. I'm not concerned about maps that I see drawn by either side, which I certainly get sent to me pretty regularly. And if anything, I dismiss them, because if it isn't based on the principles that I've drawn up here, or possibly the principles we agree to in this committee, it has no bearing on what I'm doing, right? And so I do appreciate your concern about gerrymandering, and I think our state's had a wonderful history of not doing that. And I hope that we can continue to do that.
Thank you, Senator Isaacson. That is definitely the case. So we do appreciate that. One of the things we do have a testifier, and I will get to you to the testifier. But what I wanted to do, because of the topic of contiguity, and I was wondering if Ms. Stengel, you could give us kind of the classic description that is pretty well understood in every single state about what contiguity means or is. Is that possible for you to do that, Ms. Stengel?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair and members. If you could give me a couple of minutes to collect my thoughts and look in a couple of places, perhaps you could ask me again after the testifier and I'll have a little bit more information for you.
Thank you so much. I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I thought sometimes it's good to have that kind of a resource for us right now. With that, we will go to the testifier, Isaacson Say, Director of Public Policy from Minnesota Voice. Welcome, Mr. Say. I'm glad to have you here today. You can go ahead and state your name and the organization you're representing for the audio record, and then you can go ahead and present your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Isaacson Say. I am the Policy Director at Minnesota Voice. Minnesota Voice is a coalition of organizations working towards permanent social, racial, and economic justice by increasing civic engagement and voter participation in the state. I come here to show my support for Senate File 2308. We all know for the past 5 decades or so, Minnesota redistricting process has become very highly polarizing. Redistricting should never be a party issue. It should never be used to keep or maintain power. It should always be led with community in mind and community focus. People within their community know exactly what their community should look like and what they need. And I urge you all, as you continue to do, to listen to those community. When parties are at fight for power, community loses. I'm here today to just show that support that throughout this redistricting process. I urge you all to just continue to center community voices, community-led efforts, and just is a really good opportunity for Minnesota to be transparent and to gain trust back with community. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Say. I appreciate your comments. And I think that as you've heard here, in Minnesota has not had the issue of gerrymandering. And I know that listening to the people all across the state of Minnesota is something that is regularly done every single redistricting year. Matter of fact, one of the joys of a redistricting committee is to be able to hear from everybody. And that's really important, and we really value that. With that, I am going to go to Ms. Stengel and have her give us a little bit of information on what contiguity means.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Just doing a little bit of checking around. I don't know that there's a universally accepted definition of contiguity on all of the finer points. And I'm referencing some NCSL material right now, and they define contiguity as all parts of a district being connected at some point with the rest of the district. And I think everybody will agree that contiguity means you need to be able to get to every point in the district without ever leaving that district. There are 2 pieces to contiguity that are sort of left to the legislatures and how they want to describe those. One is what we've been talking about, and that's contiguity by water. And a lot of times when you're hearing about contiguity by water, it's modified by saying, contiguity by water is acceptable if water is not, an obstacle to travel, or if it's easy to pass over the water. So for example, the Mississippi River in St. Paul, probably not a problem to cross over. If you're looking at, for example, across a large lake where there is no bridge and you have to drive, miles and miles around the side of the lake, that's a different issue. So that's a policy decision for the legislature to make if that's something they want to define. And the other part of contiguity is what's called point contiguity. And that's, sort of if a district only touches in a single point. So like if the district touches like that, that's point contiguity. And some states say that that's okay to touch just at a single point, and some states do not allow for that. And that, again, that's a policy decision.
Okay. And thank you very much, Ms. Stengel. And by the way, I remember there being a district that was drawn, and it had kind of an odd tail to it when you looked at the district in general. But in fact, it did fit because that city just happened to go down along the edge of the lake. So it fit within a city parameters and was legitimate. But if you just looked at the shape of it, you might think of that. And that's an important consideration. It isn't just the shape. With that, I appreciate, I notice Senator Isaacson in your bill, districts must be composed of convenient, contiguous territory structured into compact units. Contiguity by water is sufficient if the water does not pose a serious obstacle to travel within the district. Districts with areas that touch only at a point are not contiguous. So just to reference the fact that you have this in your bill in particular. So members, other questions about Senator Isaacson's bill before you today? Okay, well, seeing no further questions. So Senator Isaacson, we have decided that it would be awkward to send both bills out with recommendation. And so we're going to send my bill out with recommendation, and then we're going to send your bill out without recommendation. You have a lot more language, a lot more things that I think the redistricting committee needs to consider. And we're in a situation here that I think going through all those finer details, which is important for a redistricting committee, we want to give this first hearing and then move them out. And so with that, Senator Carlson, no further questions here. Senator Carlson, if you would move Senate File 2308 as amended, be recommended without recommendation to pass and be referred to the redistricting committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Recommend Senate File 2308 as amended be recommended or be
without recommendation.
Without recommendation to the redistricting committee.
All right. All right, members, please unmute and be on camera. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. And Senate File 2308 is on to the redistricting committee. Thank you very much, Senator Isaacson. I appreciate your being here today. Okay, members, we'll now go to our other bill, and I will hand the gavel over to
me, Senator Kiffmeyer.
Senator Krantz. I was looking for you. I couldn't find you on camera, and I didn't want to. Right. I will hand the gavel over to you, Senator Krantz, and when you are.
Great.
All right.
I caught the virtual gavel. Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah.
Senator Kiffmeyer, we have your bill before us, Senate File 1715. When you're ready, would you like to move your bill?
Thank you very much, Chair. I will move Senate File 1715. And Mr. Chair, I also have the A2 amendment. It is a delete all authors amendment.
Great, Senator Kiffmeyer. You also move the A2 amendment to Senate File 1715. All those, actually, everybody turn your cameras on. I think you are. Turn your mute off. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Senator Kiffmeyer, your bill is in the shape you wanted it. To the bill.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And members, probably the approach that I've taken in this bill is leaning on the previous courts that have done redistricting in Minnesota, well recognized as the principles that were used and did not end up in gerrymandering. And by pretty much all measures, having done a good job in that regard in accordance with the principles. And for that reason, the bill that I have before you here is modeled after those redistricting principles. And you're going to hear similar things to Senator Isaacson, one of them being nesting. That means that you would have the 2 House districts within 1 Senate district, and that's called nesting. And then also that it cannot be divided in the formation of a state Senate district. So that what we are used to, that's that language that does that. And again, numbering as well, legislative districts numbered in a regular series, House District 1A in the northwest corner. Senator Johnson always knows the number of his district or whoever is in that northwest corner. That's been around for quite a while. And then it goes on to lay out the numbering process. Population, faithfully adhere to the concept of population-based representation. Population of a legislative district must not deviate by more than 2% from the population of the ideal district. I would actually speak to considering lowering that to 1%. I think when you realize it's a plus or minus 2%, it can be off, but sometimes that can be difficult. I will leave that to the redistricting committee. Minority representation, they must not be drawn with either the purpose or effect of denying or abridging the voting rights of any United States citizen on account of race, ethnicity, or membership in a language minority community group. Otherwise comply with the 14th and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution and the Voting Rights Act as amended. Convenient, contiguous, and compact districts. And again, we've gone through this before, and this is similar very much to Senator Isaacson's language. Preservation of political subdivisions. And by the way, in the past, there have been some plans that have done a little bit more dividing, and in the last 2 plans, that has been a particular focus to really work hard at that. And that can be difficult when you're looking for some of the other principles. Communities of interest, where possible in compliance with the preceding principles. Again, these are in sequence of order. Communities of interest must be preserved. Include but not limited to groups of Minnesota citizens with clearly recognizable similarities of social, geographic, political, cultural, ethnic, economic, or other interests. And in general, the intent is to encompass the various communities that we have all across our state of Minnesota. The other one is incumbent, subdivision 8. Legislative districts must not be drawn for the purpose of protecting or defeating an incumbent. But the impact of redistricting on incumbent office holders is a factor subordinate to all redistricting criteria that the legislature may consider to determine whether proposed plans result in either undue incumbent protection or excessive incumbent conflicts. And so having, as Senator Isaacson said, where you would have 4 incumbents in 1 district, that can be not compliant with the principles here laid out, but again, all the other ones have to be considered first. Then the other thing is that legislative redistricting principles, and what I've done here is that congressional redistricting principles are listed separately. And the main reason is that in particular for population on subdivision 3, the congressional districts must be as nearly equal, basically a plus or minus 1 in population as is practicable. That has more to do with census blocks. It isn't always practicable, but literally very, very tightly drawn districts in regards to population. Again, the numbering, which is stated before, starts in the southeast corner of the state and ends in the northeast corner of the state. In this case, some of that is to avoid conflict with some of the numbering similarities between a Congressional District 1 and a Senate or House District 1. A minority representation is very similar or the same as we go on, continue through that as well. And then the redistricting plans and data in section 3, which has to do with geographic areas and population counts used in maps, tables, and legal descriptions as well. So this is more of a technical language. But again, this is staying close to what the courts have themselves adopted as redistricting principles, which is the purpose that I have it here. And I think that's an important consideration for us as well. As you may find sometime in the future, those who are on the redistricting committee, it is not easy. There are a lot of factors to take into consideration and a lot of decisions to be made. And no matter the technology, it is complex and takes a lot of effort to do. And keeping it simpler, especially with those communities, can be very, very helpful to the process. So I think that this is predominantly the bulk of the bill 1715 with the A2 amendment before you today, members. And with that, I would be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Members, questions? I don't see any hands up. It must have been extremely thorough, Senator Kiffmeyer. I don't see any hands. Senator Kiffmeyer, closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that I will just go ahead and move the bill. But the one thing that I would say, I think that the intention and goal of every single one of us is to have a fair redistricting plan that is transparent, that meets the principles as adopted, especially core principles, and that Minnesotans are all able to be listened to and give input into the process. And that, I think, is a very substantial goal that we would all have. And the process that we have as legislators is a very, very important one. And I look forward to continuing to work on that. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would just move that Senate File 1715 as amended be recommended to pass and to be referred to the Redistricting Committee.
Great, thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Senator Kiffmeyer moves that Senate File 1715 as amended be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on Redistricting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Senator Kiffmeyer, motion carries and your bill is on the way to redistricting. I'll toss the gavel back over to you to close.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator Grant. And members, as you know, the Federal Census Bureau was supposed to have had our data ready by April 1st. We are now into May, and as you know, they have announced that something possibly middle August, but by the end of September, they would have the data, obviously. That is much later for us to do our business during this legislative session, reminding us that we cannot start on redistricting until we get the data. It's just literally impossible until we get that data. So I'm expecting that our work will continue, but I think in the Senate, we've already had the Redistricting Committee have 2 hearings in regards to matters before them, which was very important. We've had the committee here in state government. This will now move things on to the actual Redistricting Committee. And I think we've worked very hard as a state Senate to do a good job of having these matters come before us. And members, with that, our business being concluded for today, but I will mention to you that we do have a hearing tomorrow afternoon at 4:15, and the agenda will be the Pension Commission bill will come before our committee. That will be the only item on the agenda for state government hearing tomorrow. And this generally comes to us. The Pension Commission has many, many hearings. They do a great deal of work. They will present their bill. And my intention is to move it on to whichever committee, finance or rules, whatever it is that the rules dictate that it needs to go to. But we will have that agenda item and we'll have that hearing tomorrow afternoon. So I'll see you tomorrow afternoon. And with that, we are adjourned.